Hello and welcome. In today's video, we are going to be talking about dungeons. There is a lot to talk about when it comes to dungeons, so this video is going to narrow in specifically on how to maximize your rewards and how to combat and battle the dungeon AI, those dungeon lackeys, as well as the dungeon boss. So I had some technical difficulties and have already started this dungeon, but we're right at the beginning, haven't completed any of these battles yet. So we can just go ahead and take a look at. This is a typical standard dungeon. You'll have a boss fight, 3 of these 4x4 battle rooms, and 4 of these 3x3 battle rooms. So there's always going to be a boss fight, 7 battles, a safe, a chest, and a key. In addition, the cards that you start with, they're always going to total out to 21 power. And there's also never going to be abilities in your starting deck. So you won't see like home field power up or ally. You won't see those in your starting deck. You'll have to acquire those along the way if you want them. It should also be noted that dungeon decks, they're not built out of cards that you already have. So really you could get any basic card in the whole game, can be a part of your starting dungeon deck. It's totally separate from your regular card inventory. Now when it comes to playing these fights against the dungeon lackeys, I have sort of a pattern a strategy, I guess. You want to make it as easy as possible on yourself, if that makes sense. You want to create cards or place cards on the board that are really easy for you to recapture. So a good example is like, you might be inclined to place that there, get the +3 buff, and recapture that corner card. I wouldn't do that. I'd actually much prefer playing this card here, because if we still recapture that card, but now this -2 becomes a whole lot easier to recapture than what would have been a +4. If it was a +4, I actually would have only had 2 cards that could recapture that. So I'm going to go ahead and recapture pretty easily. And this is pretty much it for the strategy, right? It's not too complicated. You want to lock in these cards as best as you can, and you want to avoid giving the dungeon lackey the opportunity to lock in cards for free. So like if I was to play here, sure I would lock in 1 card, but then it's almost guaranteed that the opponent's going to play and capture and lock in this card that I won't be able to reclaim this corner card whatsoever. So I'm going to avoid playing there for now if I can. Actually, not that I'm going to avoid playing there, I just will play there later, probably. Because again, spending these, it might feel bad to take a 0 with a 6, but really what you want to focus on is having these easy to reclaim cards. Now, I don't see a good way around this. At some point you do have to make some gambles, some trades, so I'm going to take these 2. He could take this card from the bottom, that would be kind of bad for me. That's quite good for me. Had my opponent taken it from the bottom, I would have no access to the bottom right corner card, or like a play right there. I can't touch that card anymore. But, I mean, over time, those sort of things are just, they happen. And at this stage in the game, I'm focused on securing as many cards as possible. Oh wow, I totally expected my opponent to be able to recapture that. And when in doubt, when it comes to the last play, when in doubt, unless it's against the dungeon boss, because then you know what elements are in their deck, it's a better play to go ahead and avoid the elemental tile, unless you can secure the buff from it, because with 1 card left in their deck, and it's 1 of 4 elements, so there's only a 1 in 4 chance that they can get a +3. So unless you know what the opponent's deck is, when in doubt, you can go ahead and avoid playing on that elemental tile yourself, because chances are that your opponent's going to get a debuff from it instead of a buff. Again, it's a 1 in 4 chance, and I've been burned by that before. So I'm going to go ahead and take gold for the reward. We'll talk a little bit more about gold, leveling up cards, what's the difference, what should you do. The answer is that really depends, but I'll break it down later in this video. So as you saw, we won that battle, we got to pick a reward, and we also got some gold. Every single battle tile gives a base value of 150 150 gold, with the exception of the boss tile that has a base value of 300. We'll get to that later. But that battle, that first one, went quite well for me. Per card that you win above and beyond what's required, so think of it this way, the base value is 150, so in a 3x3 game, there's 9 cards. You could win, let's say 5 to 4 is like the bare minimum requirement to win. So if I have 5 cards at the end, my opponent has 4, hooray, I win, I get 150 coins. Now for each and every card above that number, above that 5 to 4, say I won 6 to 3, for each number above, you're going to get an additional 50 coins. So I'm just thinking, yeah, I'm going to play this here, because even if my opponent plays there, to reclaim this, I can still take it back. However, we want to get a little bit greedy, because again, this is all about, for me, maximizing your rewards. I'm going to play here, because that's going to do 2 things. It's going to flip this card, and it's going to secure both of these cards. Those 2 can no longer be touched, and I'm okay with flipping this one, because it has a 0 exposed. It's almost guaranteed that the opponent can take that card, which leaves this spot free. So it's unfortunate that he has a 3 on top showing. I can't recapture that. Would have been great, but I'm still plenty happy with a 7-2 victory. So like I said, that 7-2 victory is 2 cards above the 150 base value. So I'm going to get an extra 100 coins for that victory. So I'm going to go ahead and this time, instead of taking gold, I'm going to level up this card. So when it comes to leveling up cards versus taking gold versus taking a new card, there's a couple different ways you can go about it. The safest option, if you're really not sure what to do, sort of a when in doubt, is level up a card. When in doubt, level up a card. It's pretty simple. Leveling up a card will make that card stronger for the entirety of your dungeon run. In addition, at the end of the dungeon run, you will gain copies of that card. Let's go ahead and jump right into another battle. I'm kind of enjoying the strategy so far. I'm seeing success with it. And this sort of information is pretty good. Like, you can, whenever an opponent plays an upper hand card, you get a window into how many cards of that element they have left. So whereas normally I would try to just recapture this, I saw that they had a couple air cards. It is possible that they have an ally card, and so if you want to, you can play around that. I don't really care to play around that. I guess I prefer just being brain dead about it and following my strategy, but it works for me. So that part's up to you. You could change your game plan based on, if you want to play around ally, but you don't know if the opponent has it until you see it, so it's kind of risky, kind of hit and miss. Okay, so that's a pretty strong card. I can recapture it with this 5. So I'm going to play here. They're going to play here, and I'm going to hope that a 4 is strong enough to beat that. Barely. We would have got the win either way, but again, this just nets us that. If this one flip would have been enough, this just nets us that plus 50 coins that you really should always be looking for. Because it really adds up. Over the course of 7 fights, it can add up quite a bit. So just taking a look at my options, I'm going to go ahead and take gold again. When it comes to selecting your rewards, I've gotten enough copies of every card in the game to level those up to level 4, but what I found is that I'm short on coins, short on gold by quite a bit. So from your standard playing dungeons, in the beginning I leveled up cards for the most part, but in the long run, if you completely fill out your card collection, you will find yourself short on coins. So if you're really eager to get a complete level 4 card collection, or to get certain cards to level 4 as fast as possible, then definitely prioritize the coins. The loot though, you can check at any point here. So if you level up a copy of a card, for common cards you will get 12 copies of the card per level up. Well, and even the level up stop at 4, meaning level 4 is the maximum level. But you can still collect that same card as a reward, and it will still give you an additional 12 copies, even if that card's already level 4 in your dungeon deck. Hopefully that made sense. And I know there's different values for rare and epic cards. Epic cards, I'm pretty sure it gives you 1 copy of the card per level up. And see, rare cards, oh, it's been forever. I can't remember the value on rare cards. I will put it in the description of the video. But I do think it's worth noting. Oh wait, no, I remember now. I think rare cards, it's 2. Crap, I really can't remember for sure. So I'm gonna go ahead and do my homework on that later and put that in the description of the video. The really important thing that I wanted to talk about was epic cards. So if you ever get the opportunity to level up an epic card in a dungeon run, I'd say absolutely do it. And I'll talk a little bit more about why later in a resource guide and resource video that's all about in-game resources and what certain upgrades cost. But reason being is that epic cards, I'm going to take gold again. Epic cards, they upgrade on a slightly different scale than regular and common cards. And so in relation to their upgrades, that single copy of an epic card, it's kind of a big deal. Not bad at all. So that right there is a rare chest. You can either find a common, rare, or epic chest. Which common chests will just have a bunch of common cards, rares will have a little bit of orbs and a bunch of rare cards, and then epics will have a very few amount of epic cards and, excuse me, a little bit more orbs. So anyway, this is pretty much it. I go through dungeons and I just kind of stick to my game plan, and you know, there's some battles you end up with better rewards than others, but really what you're looking for is that consistency over time, and I find that this strategy tends to get me there. See, this is an instance in which I almost wish I hadn't leveled up this card, because if I place this here, I can no longer take it back from the right, knowing that the Dungeon Lackey is very likely to take it from the left. If this was a 4, then I have a card, this one, where I could take it from the right. Still... I think I have to take a gamble here. No, you know, let's not gamble. This means that my opponent can very well play here, lock this card in, and that's fine. And then the last play I'm going to make here is I'm going to play this right in the middle. My opponent's going to take it from one side, regardless of that. I know that I can take in either corner. This card captures 2. So again, 6 to 3 or 5 to 4 with this strategy is usually pretty consistent. You're able to win, but as to how much you win by, that can vary, right? Just because the RNG involved in the opponent's deck, sometimes the RNG involved in where they place their cards, there's definitely a pattern that you can play around and take advantage of. But here we are, we're at chests, or excuse me, not chests, the dungeon's safe. So the dungeon's safe, as you can see, select a card and add a stack with the amount indicated to the safe. If you defeat the dungeon boss, these cards will be rewarded to you. It does exactly what it says. And there's the stacks indicated. It doesn't matter whether or not you have a card leveled up. So if you're on the hunt for a specific card, you want to get more copies of a specific card, you can always just grab 1 copy from any Dungeon Lackey that you beat, and then save it in the chest for later. Again, I don't really need copies of cards anymore, but let's just go ahead and select the one that I've leveled up, netting myself even more copies at the end. So now you can see I've got these in my loot. These are from the dungeon chest. And it even has the correct numbers on how many of them you have. This is all separate from your in-game inventory. This is a reflection only of what you've accumulated in the dungeon so far. And it's worth noting that your dungeon loot does not reflect what's in the chest, or excuse me, in the dungeon safe. I don't know why I'm having a hard time with that. So we're down to just 2 4x4 battles, which do take a little bit longer, but they're not too complicated, and then the dungeon boss. So as you're progressing through the dungeon, again, I really think you should place all your focus on being able to recapture your own cards, and not to really worry about too much else. Again, like I'll intentionally take a debuff there because I want my cards to be easy to recapture. Among all this strategizing, really don't forget to enjoy dungeons. They're a lot of fun. They really are. The music is fantastic. The team really did a great job. So this one, probably going to get captured here. 4 is not that strong, but again, that's fine. Okay, that's overkill, but I'll take it. So this is pretty weak on the other 2 sides, and block one in. So this is a situation in which I would go ahead and pull the trigger on getting the buff. However, I'm gonna be greedy about it, and I'm going to play this here because I want my opponent to play here and recapture this. Great. Now again, I don't totally recommend that sort of strategy in play against that's not very good for me. We still win this fight, but I was hoping I could reclaim whatever card he played there, assuming it would take that card. Anyway, I don't totally recommend making those sort of greedy decisions against human players, as they will often punish you for it. But against the AI, which is fairly predictable, it's not a bad choice. So, again, the dungeon safe, I used it as soon as I got to it. But as long as you use it before you finish that boss fight, it doesn't matter. So this is a stage in the game where like you'll find better abilities later on in your dungeon run. So you can leave that safe tile open, select this, add it to your deck, and then go deposit it in the safe. I thought that was worth noting. I didn't do that because, again, I don't need copies of cards anymore, but definitely something to consider if you're on the hunt for specific cards. Then consider not using the dungeon safe until you either found what you wanted or you've been to every standard battle and you just have the boss left. Definitely do it before the boss, because once you beat the boss, your dungeon runs over and there's no going back. And I really do, it does take a little bit of time, but I really do recommend you go through and get everything. Get the chest, get the safe, get every battle. Really, if you're putting the orbs into a dungeon run, definitely get all the value you can out of it. Okay. So I really hope my opponent doesn't play here, but they might. Yeah. 7's pretty strong. But I don't really want to commit anywhere right now. Sure, I'll commit here. Just because I don't think my opponent's going to reclaim a 9. Let's play this here. Awesome. That's the spot that oh wow, they have strong cards. Again, this is a gamble, so I'm going to reclaim this card, have a huge number showing up so that I don't want Didn't want him to play there because that's 2 cards that it sort of balances out. So what would have happened had I played there was I would have flipped these 2 cards and had a card there, and they would have played on the bottom, securing themselves these 2 cards. So I am down a card at the end, and that's just part of the game. You lose the gamble sometimes. But I'm going to go ahead and play here. And this is definitely still a win, but we'll see by how much. Awesome. That's that. Honestly, despite the fact that I lost 1 card on this gamble here, still pretty darn good. So again, 9 to 8 is the break point for 150 gold. So like this right here, I don't need these cards anymore, but I'm still, just on principle, I'm going to take that level up. So you have to think about it this way. If you were to put a copy of an epic card into a dungeon safe, that nets you 2 copies of that card. If you were to put, for example, a common, that nets you, as we got, 12. And for example, the first level up of a common card takes 50 copies of a card, which a dungeon safe will give you. And this takes 4, which a dungeon safe will give you half of that. Just on a sliding scale, this level up reward for any epic card gives you half of what a dungeon safe would, whereas the level ups for both common and rares doesn't give you half of, it gives you a quarter of what it would. So leveling up your epics is mathematically twice as valuable. I don't know if that makes any sense. Sorry if I'm rambling. The gist of it is that if you ever get the opportunity to level up an epic card, take that opportunity. I should spend a moment, because I never did, but I'll spend a moment talking about claiming just cards as a reward, right? So you don't have to level up a card, you can just pick a card and replace any of the cards in your dungeon deck with that card. I didn't do that because, and I wouldn't recommend it too much unless you're kind of new, you're unsure, and you're worried you might not beat the dungeon boss, then go for it. Again, I'll talk about it on a sliding scale, whereas replacing cards of yours, like you can replace this card, this power 1 card, with a power 5 card. In dungeons, there's no limit to the power of your deck. So by the end of a dungeon run, all of these could be power 5, they could all be power 4. The game will not limit you in that regard, no restriction. The only downside to doing that is when you choose a card and replace it, replace one of your other dungeon deck cards with that new card, that doesn't give you any lasting reward immediately. You'd then have to level up that card or put it in the safe to gain a lasting reward from that. So you could make that decision to grab a card, not level 1 up, and replace something in your dungeon deck with it, but it won't net you copies of the card, no permanent rewards. Whereas leveling up a card increases the strength over all of your dungeon deck, but you don't get gold for it. You do get some copies of the card, so that's sort of the middle of the road option, I think, where if you're replacing your low power cards with high power cards, you're playing it really safe. You want to beat the dungeon boss for sure. You want to have strong cards. The middle of the road is leveling up copies of your cards. That will make your dungeon deck a little bit stronger, but it will also give you rewards at the end of your dungeon run, whereas you'll gain copies of the cards you leveled up. And the last one, where it's, I guess, the riskiest, where you want to be the most confident in your ability to beat the dungeon boss, is just taking that gold reward. Because taking the gold reward, remember, in the long run, as you play the game, you're going to be short on coins, on gold, not copies of cards. And again, this is the long run. That's my 2 cents about choosing what reward. Replacing cards, in your dungeon deck is the safest option. Doesn't net you any immediate rewards. And taking extra copies, leveling up your cards, getting those extra copies, that's sort of a middle of the road where you do get a permanent reward, your deck gets a little bit stronger, and lastly, taking those coins, I do think is the most valuable, but is the most risky. before you go ahead and challenge the dungeon boss, always click on it, take a look at it. I would say at the very beginning of the dungeon, tap on this. Take a look at what's in there. You don't need to familiarize yourself and memorize every single card in their deck. What you're really looking for is ally cards. You want to know if they have ally cards. And I can tell because my opponent doesn't have any ally cards that I'm pretty safe to go ahead and continue my strategy. You do have to play against ally a little bit differently because then they have access to recapture some of those cards that you've locked in by having no more exposed edges. It can also be worth noting if they have Defender or something for the purposes of reclaiming your own cards, because even against dungeon bosses, you really should still play with, you know, the ability to recapture your own cards. You want to keep that in mind. So yeah, the game plan really doesn't change much because the dungeon boss doesn't have ally. This sort of play is only safe, like if they had an ally card and they play it here, then they recapture both of these cards, and you end up in a pretty rough spot. Let's go ahead and... Oops. Oh gosh. My emulator is unresponsive. Well, I might cut this reloading the game. Not totally sure yet. Anyway, if you've watched this far, thanks for doing so. If you enjoy it, leave a like, comment, tell me why you think I'm wrong. Yeah, I'm open to it. This is how I play dungeons, right? This is not the only way to play dungeons. But I do think it's good advice if you're going for consistency, especially because, you know, I think you'll... If you want a high-level deck, you want to get level 2, level 3 cards, the way to do it is dungeons. And those really do take a lot of time. And as you can see, I have quite a bit of coins, but I have so many more cards that many that I do have max level, but so many that I still need to not get more copies of cards, but get more coins. Oops, that's not the option I wanted. For example, the level up cost on this is 40,000. So sure, it seems like a lot of coins, but I can only upgrade 3 rare cards up to here, and then I'm out of coins again. So there's still a lot more to do. I did the math a while ago, and I think I'm about 2.5 million Aether coins away from being able to have everything level 4, not rivals. I'm just talking about the cards. The currently in the game 109 cards, which is very soon to be expanded when Clarence Battle Pass runs out in 3.5 days, or 3 days, 4 hours. Anyway, sorry about the technical difficulties. Getting back to the dungeon. Currently, dungeons don't have save states in battle. They did used to at some point, but the devs are still tweaking some of those things, so we will have to start from the beginning, but that's fine. We only had played like 3 cards, and the boss's deck doesn't change, so there's that. The elemental tile layout will actually change when you reload the battle like this. But again, for the sort of strategy that we're going for, and the fact that dungeon decks aren't balanced, like a few of their cards will be level 2, some of your cards, depending on how you played, might be level 2, might be higher. It just ends up not really mattering too much. And I would say that you really should just play trying to reclaim as many of your own cards as possible. And that's the focus you should put into building your dungeon deck. This is a bit of an unusual play. I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. I want my opponent to play there or there, because I don't want them to be able to retake this from the bottom. Because even though it's a strong card, a 7, now an 8 to the bottom, I do believe that the opponent would have been able to recapture that. So and again, I think they'll be able to recapture this too, but there's kind of no card that I can put there that makes it uncapturable. The important thing is having these two tucked away and secured. This is a play that I kind of think is safe, right? I don't think that they have a 10 to the right, or I guess they'd need an 11, because you know that they only have Earth cards in their deck, so this card becomes, I think, pretty secure. Now another thing, I'm going to go ahead and play here and hope that they don't retake that. If they do, yeah, even if they play there, yeah, it's pretty rough. But it's to be expected. They have level 2 cards, they have strong cards. Just sort of is how it is sometimes. But this will net us a win no matter what. And dungeon bosses, I should say, oh darn, he's going to recapture that card. Dungeon bosses, it's really valuable to get a win by a landslide, because basically the reward scale is doubled. The base value is 300. Every card that you beat, like go over and above beating a dungeon boss on, you'll get an extra 100 Aether coins. Anyway, and this is the reward screen. It'll show you how many copies, like these card counts reflect my inventory, not the dungeon deck inventory. And you can choose, again, the reward scale pretty much times 2 from a dungeon safe, where a dungeon safe will give you 50 common cards, 10 rares, or 2 epics. And this is all doubled. And then you've also got the option to just take gold, which I need. So I'm going to go ahead and take gold. Yeah, that's dungeons in a nutshell. I'd say get comfortable doing them, enjoy them, play them at your own pace. Don't get burnt out of them, because the main way to advance in this game, like to grow your card collection, to grow your resources, in terms of copies of cards and coins, to level up cards, your main resource for all of that, especially coins, is and should be dungeons. Just talking about coins real quick, so you saw that I got 3,000 coins from that dungeon run, and that cost me 25 Abyss Orbs. If we pop over here to the shop, you'll notice that for 60 Abyss Orbs, you can just instantly get 1,000 coins. But dungeons are just so much better, like so much more value, right? Because you can get 2,000 to 3,000 Aether coins for 25 Abyss Orbs, in addition to gaining copies of cards and being able to play the game. So that's it for this video. If I missed anything, obvious, let me know in the comments. If you liked it, let me know. If you disliked it, let me know. This is just my guide, my opinions, and my strategies on how to play dungeons. It's worked well for me, and I mainly wanted to put it out there prior to the release of Edelus, because with Edelus's release in 3 days, 4 hours, from the time we're recording even, not the time that you're watching this video, there are going to be new cards added to the game, and I don't think I mentioned it yet, you do have a chance to find legendary cards, rival cards, in dungeons. In standard dungeons and elemental dungeons, you do have a small chance. I believe it's 2 or 4%. I've seen both numbers in the Discord. I know it's a small percent, but it's there, and I've gotten quite a few legendaries from playing dungeons. Don't expect it as a way of accumulating legendaries, but it definitely happens, and if you play enough dungeons, it'll happen to you. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Until next time.